Hello everyone, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to this morning's Sutta class or Dhamma talk about Citta the Householder. We will start with the Namo Tassa as usual. Feel free to join in if you like. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. So this morning we are continuing our series about the chief lay disciples, our 4-part series. This is part 3 of 4. Yesterday we did the 2 female chief lay disciples, Kuchuttara and Nandamata, and today we are starting with the male chief lay disciples, and today we are doing Citta the Householder. And then next time, whenever that will be, we can do Hataka of Alavi, the second chief male lay disciple. So Citta the Householder is not just one of the 2 chief lay disciples. He also appears in a list of the foremost laymen in the Anguttara Nikaya, and there he is foremost among those Buddhist disciples who are teaching Dhamma. So he is a very, very accomplished Dhamma teacher. And again, we see that that teaching Dhamma, this is obviously a wisdom quality. And again, we see what I mentioned yesterday already. Among the pairs of chief disciples, there's always one who has a wisdom quality and the other one has a samadhi quality. So the first ones among the pairs, Sariputta, Kema, Chitta, and Kuchuttara are always the ones with the wisdom quality. And the second ones, Mahamoggallana, Upalavanna, and Nandamata are the ones with the samadhi quality and the psychic powers. So Chitta, having a wisdom quality, does not have psychic powers. In fact, as we will see in a few minutes, he is slightly scared of psychic powers, but he finds them very fascinating. So it's very clear that he himself did not have psychic powers. So Chitta, as the name already says, he was a householder and he was a merchant. He was from the merchant class. The commentary tells us directly that he was a merchant or that he was a banker, sometimes also translated as a treasurer. From the suttas themselves, that's certainly the impression that we get when we read between the lines, but they don't spell it out directly that he was a merchant, but it does seem very likely that he was one. So the commentary seems to be correct here. And he lived in a place called Machikasanda, and since he was such a strong lay follower of the Buddha, he built his own monastery there, which is called the Wild Mango Grove Monastery. And in that monastery, he was the main supporter. He provided all the 4 requisites to the Sangha, so he was also very wealthy. And since Chitta is a male person, we have a lot more material about him than we had about the female chief lay disciples. So we have an entire chapter in the Samyutta Nikaya called the Chitta Samyutta, which contains 10 suttas only about him, where he is the main character. So we can get a very good overview over his character. And he also appears in the Vinaya. So he is involved, one of the main persons, in laying down a new Vinaya rule. So today we don't have the time to look at that Vinaya rule too. But it's also a very funny story because in his monastery, the Wild Mango Grove, there was a monk who was very entitled, and he treated Chitta quite badly. And Chitta, being such an outstanding practitioner, didn't get provoked. He just kind of rebuked him a little bit, but kind of ignored him mostly. And then the monk got very upset, and he said he was going to leave the monastery and go to the Buddha and inform the Buddha of how badly Chitta was treating him. And so Chitta was like, yeah, go and tell him everything in very much detail, no problem. But I won't be surprised at all if the Buddha tells you to come back here and apologize to me. And that's exactly what happens. So the Buddha rebukes the monk and tells him that he is acting like really foolishly. And then a new rule is implemented, a new Vinaya rule, that if you mistreat a layperson as a monk, then you have to go and apologize. So the monk comes back and apologizes to Chitta in the end. So there is a happy end to that Vinaya story. But today we are looking at the 10 suttas in the Chitta Samyutta. This is Samyutta Nikaya and the Samyutta 41. I put a link in the description box and also in the live chat, so feel free to follow along. Of course, we cannot read all of the 10 suttas in that chapter today, so we will just skim through a few and read a few, see how it goes. And the interesting thing about those suttas there is that some of them contain very, very deep Dhamma talks by Chitta, because he is such an outstanding Dhamma teacher. So they're very beautiful for that reason. And some of the others that just contain very funny stories or very entertaining occurrences in his life. So it's a very entertaining chapter in the Samyutta Nikaya. So I will be reading from Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation because my wrists are injured, and so I don't want to scroll around on my computer too much, and therefore I'm using a book. But if you want to follow along, you can follow along with Bhante Sujata's translation online. And so this is the Chitta Samyutta. The first sutta here is called the Fetter. And this is, in this story, we're not going to read the sutta, but in this sutta, there's a number of elder bhikkhus. So they're very senior monks here. And after alms round, they sit together and they discuss about a certain Dhamma point, which is if the expression the fetter and the expression the things that fetter are the same thing, or are they different things? And even though they are senior monks, they cannot agree. And then Citta the Householder hears what's going on. And so he goes to the monastery and he teaches those senior monks. So even though he's a layperson and they are senior monks, he's not at all shy to go there and to teach the monks. So there isn't that hierarchy there that we sometimes see between monastics and lay people, but he totally is totally happy to go there and teach the monks if the monks themselves don't know certain points of the Dhamma. And the monks also themselves, they are very happy to be taught. It's not that they feel somehow humiliated or anything. They rejoice in the teaching and they praise Chitta very much for his knowledge in the Dhamma. So it's a very beautiful sutta. And the second sutta in this Chitta Samyutta is called Isidatta number 1. And in this one, Citta the Householder invites a number of bhikkhus who are staying in his monastery, the Wild Mango Grove, to his house for a meal dana. And so that group goes there, and after the meal, after the meal, Chitta asks the most senior monk another question of Dhamma. So the question he asks is, what does the expression diversity of elements mean? And again, those senior monks in that monastery don't seem to have been too knowledgeable, because again, the senior monk cannot answer that question. And Chitta repeats the question 3 times, and 3 times the senior monk remains silent. And then the most junior monk of that assembly asks for permission to speak. And then the most junior monk, his name is Isidatta, gives the right answer to Chitta. And Chitta is very pleased. And the senior monks, interestingly, also are very pleased. So on the way back to the monastery, they praise Isidatta and they tell him, please, next time that happens again, speak up again and explain the Dhamma again. So they really encourage the junior monks to speak up. Again, they don't feel insulted, even though they were the senior monks and couldn't answer. So again, the message of the sutta again is that it's important that we speak the Dhamma if we know the answer, and our position in the hierarchy doesn't matter, whether we are householders or whether we are the junior monastics. If the seniors cannot answer, then whoever knows the Dhamma should speak the Dhamma. So I think these two suttas are very, very beautiful suttas. And the third sutta in the Samyutta is Isidatta number 2. So the same junior monk Isidatta appears again. And this is a sutta I actually want to read with you, so we can get an impression of how this actually all happens. So in my version, the version by Bhikkhu Bodhi, the introduction here to this sutta is left out. I'm not sure how it's like on Sutta Central, whether Bhante Sujato has put the whole introduction in or not. But the introduction is just exactly the same as in the sutta before. So Citta the householder goes and invites a group of monks for a meal in his house. And when they had the meal, then Chitta goes to them and tries to have a Dhamma conversation with them. And at that point, the sutta picks up the story here. So the sutta goes, then Citta the householder approached the elder bhikkhus, paid homage to them, sat down to one side, and said to the venerable chief elder, Venerable elder, there are various views that arise in the world. The world is eternal, or the world is not eternal, or the world is finite, or the world is infinite, or the soul and the body are the same, or the soul is one thing, the body is another, or the Tathagata exists after death, or the Tathagata does not exist after death, or the Tathagata both exists and does not exist after death, or the Tathagata neither exists nor does not exist after death. These, as well as the 62 views mentioned in the Brahmachala. So this list that Chitta goes through here, these 10 points, these are called the 10 speculations that the Buddha refused to answer. So this seems to have been a list that was popular around the Buddha's time, not only in Buddhism, but generally something that religious leaders were discussing and were supposed to provide answers to. So is the world infinite? And is the soul and the body the same? And so on. These were general spiritual questions that people wanted to have an answer to. And the Buddha refused to answer those questions because they are not helpful on the path. They do not lead to the ending of suffering. And the Buddha only teaches about the ending of suffering. And he is not interested in those kind of speculations. So Chitta, of course, being a very accomplished layperson, knows that list also. And here also we again see a reference to another sutta, just in the same way we saw that yesterday with the Way to the Beyond that Anandamata was reciting. So that was the Parayana, another Buddhist text. Here we see the Brahmachala. The Brahmachala, of course, is the first sutta of the Digha Nikaya. And again, this seems to have been a sutta that was popular. Even at the Buddha's time, many people had memorized it. Many people knew about it. And Chitta, of course, being an outstanding layperson, he has a very good grasp of the Dhamma, and he knows. Again, this shows us that the wide knowledge of Chitta in the Dhamma, and he also memorized many suttas. And so he's asking about this Brahmachala Sutta and the 10 speculative views. And he asks, now, when what exists, do these views come to be? When what is non-existent, do these views not come to be? So how do these speculative views come to be or not come to be? And when this was said, the Venerable Chief Elder was silent. So again, the elder is shown to not be very well versed in the Dhamma, and he can't answer that kind of question. And a second time and a third time, Citta the householder asked the same question, and a second time and a third time, the Venerable Chief Elder was silent. Now, on that occasion, the Venerable Isidatta was the most junior bhikkhu in that Sangha. Then the Venerable Isidatta said to the Venerable Chief Elder, "Allow me, Venerable Elder, to answer Citta the Householder's question." So here we see a common courtesy that we still practice nowadays in the Sangha. If there is a junior member who asks for permission to answer a question, or even if there's a junior member who's giving a Dhamma talk, just before the Dhamma talk starts, usually the junior one will ask the most senior person in the room, the most senior monastic in the room, for permission to give the Dhamma talk. And even if this is prearranged, even if it's just a formality, this is just something that is polite to do, because usually it's the most senior person who's giving the Dhamma talk. And of course, the most senior one, the most senior one is quite happy for Isidatta to speak. And he says, "Answer it, friend Isidatta." So Isidatta says, "Now, householder, are you asking thus?" And then he repeats the entire question. And Chitta says, "Yes, Venerable Sir." And so Isidatta says, "As to the various views that arise in the world, householder, the world is eternal," and so on. They go through the 10 speculative views, as well as the 62 speculative views mentioned in the Brahmachala Sutta. When there is identity view, these views come to be. When there is no identity view, these views do not come to be. So identity view, Sakaya Ditti, obviously is one of the lower fetters in Buddhism, the one that we break at stream entry. And as long as we believe there is a stable self within us, then based on that belief, those speculative views make sense. Like, it makes sense to think about those kind of things. Once we understand dependent origination, it no longer makes sense to indulge in those speculative views, because we see that they are fundamentally based on a wrong premise of how the world works. And then Chitta says, "But Venerable Sir, how does identity view come to be?" And Isidatta says, "Here, householder, the uninstructed worldling who has no regard for the noble ones and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma, who has no regard for the good persons and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma, regards form as self or self as possessing form, or form as in self or self as in form. He regards feeling as self, perception as self, volitional formations as self, and consciousness as self, or self as possessing consciousness, or consciousness as in self, or self as in consciousness. It is in such a way that identity view comes to be." So Isidatta here points out that the 5 khandhas, the body khandha and the 4 mental khandhas, can serve as a basis for us to attach to and to think that our true self is somewhere in one or more of these 5 khandhas. And we have to assume, obviously, Chitta is the one asking questions here and Isidatta is the one answering. But since Chitta is such an accomplished layperson, what is likely happening here is that he knows the answer actually, but he wants to have a Dhamma talk. So he's asking those questions in order to give the occasion for someone to give a Dhamma talk. So Chitta continues to ask, "And Venerable Sir, how does identity view not come to be?" And Isidatta says, "Here, householder, the instructed noble disciple who has regard for the noble ones and is skilled and disciplined in their Dhamma, who has regard for the good persons and is skilled and disciplined in their Dhamma, does not regard form as self, or self as possessing form, or form as in self, or self as in form. He does not regard feeling as self, or perception, or volitional formations, these are sankharas, or consciousness as self, or self as in consciousness. It is in such a way that identity view does not come to be." So if we don't think that our whatever true self we think that exists is found in one of those 5 khandhas, then there is no identity view. So Chitta is quite happy with this teaching. And he says, "Venerable Sir, where does Master Isidatta come from?" "I come from Avanti, householder." There is, Venerable Sir, a clansman from Avanti named Isidatta, an unseen friend of ours, who has gone forth. Has the Venerable One ever met him? Yes, householder. So Chitta says he has a friend called Isidatta from Avanti. He has never met him. He says an unseen friend of ours. He never met him. And he knows that that person has gone forth. So we might wonder, how is it that he can have a friend that he never met, since at that time there was no internet, he couldn't have like an email friendship or anything, and there wasn't even that much writing, so he couldn't even have a pen pal. But since we know that Chitta was a merchant, and merchants did trade, with faraway places, so they wouldn't necessarily go to all those places themselves, but they would send family members or employees to do trade in the various directions. And so in even faraway places, wherever they were doing trade, they would need to have acquaintances, they would need to have other people with whom they could do trade. So it's very likely that they had a very extensive network of acquaintances in even far away places, but they haven't necessarily met all of them personally. Maybe their relatives met them, or their employees met them, and they just heard stories about them, and they felt friendly towards each other because they were supporting each other in their trade. And when they were coming to those places, then they were offering places to stay, and so on. So we hear those stories in the suttas, even like from the merchants, but also from kings that were in contact with faraway kings that they had not necessarily ever met, but that they felt friendly towards. And they so this is actually quite common in the suttas. We have a story of a friendship between King Bimbisara and King Pukkusati, who also never met, but who felt that they had a strong friendship between each other. So considering someone a friend without ever having met them is not something that was unusual back then. So Chitta is asking about his friend Isidatta from Avanti, and the monk Isidatta from Avanti says, yes, I know him. And so Chitta asks, where is that venerable one now dwelling, Venerable Sir? When this was said, the Venerable Isidatta was silent. So Chitta says, is the master Isidatta? Yes, householder. So he finds out this is actually his old friend. And Chitta says, then let Master Isidatta delight in the delightful wild mango grove at Machikasana. I will be zealous in providing Master Isidatta with robes, alms, food, lodgings, and medicinal requisites. That is kindly said, householder. Then Citta the householder, having delighted and rejoiced in the Venerable Isidatta's words, with his own hand served and satisfied the elder bhikkhus with the various kinds of delicious food. When the elder bhikkhus had finished eating and had put away their bowls, they rose from their seats and departed. Then the venerable chief elder said to Venerable Isidatta, it is good, friend Isidatta, that the answer to this question occurred to you. The answer did not occur to me. Therefore, friend Isidatta, whenever a similar question comes up at some other time, you should clear it up. So again, the elder bhikkhu is rejoicing that Isidatta, the most junior one, was able to answer the question, and is encouraging him in the future to also speak up if such a question comes up again. And then the Venerable Isidatta set his lodging in order, and taking bowl and robe, he left Machikasana. When he left Machikasana, he left for good, and he never returned. So we might wonder, why did he leave for good and never return? And actually, in the next sutta, that same situation occurs with another monk who also leaves for good and never returns. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that once we have read the next sutta. The next sutta doesn't have a deep Dhamma teaching, but it's a cute story. So as I mentioned, there are lots of cute stories in this Chitta Samyutta. So I think I just wanted to include one of those suttas in our sutta class today. So the next one, number 4, Mahaka's Miracle, is another sutta that we are going to read together now. And this one goes as follows. On one occasion, a number of elder bhikkhus were dwelling at Machikasana in the wild mango grove. Then Chitta the householder approached those elder bhikkhus, paid homage to them, sat down to one side and said to them, "Venerable sirs, let the elders consent to accept tomorrow's meal from me in my cowshed." So again, he is giving a meal invitation. This time he doesn't invite them to his house for some reason, and it's not quite clear why. Maybe he has work to do at the cowshed and he's there anyway. Or maybe, I don't know. It's a little weird that they are invited to a cowshed, but that's just one of the quirky points of this sutta. And so the elder bhikkhus consented by silence. Then Chitta the householder, having understood that the elders had consented, rose from his seat, paid homage to them, and departed, keeping them on his right. When the night had passed, in the morning, the elder bhikkhus dressed, took their bowls and outer robes, and went to the cowshed of Citta the householder. They sat down on the appointed seats. Then Citta the householder, with his own hand, served and satisfied the elder bhikkhus with delicious milk rice made with ghee. So this is very it's considered a very, very delicious meal, also a very, very expensive meal. So milk rice was something that in other suttas we are told that this is what princes eat, what the kings eat. So this is considered a very high quality meal, and ghee obviously also was very expensive at that time. So this is, even though this is at a cowshed, still this is very a very high quality meal. And maybe that's an indication why this happens at a cowshed, because it's milk, rice, and ghee. So these are obviously dairy products. Maybe for that reason, the meal takes place at a cowshed. So when the elder bhikkhus had finished eating and had put away their bowls, they rose from their seats and departed. Then Chitta the householder, having said, "Give away the remainder," followed close behind the elder bhikkhus. Now on that occasion, the heat was sweltering, and the elders went along as if their bodies were melting because of the food they had eaten. So milk, rice, and ghee, this is obviously very rich food, also with a lot of oil and fat in it. So it was hot and they were suffering because they were so full. Now on that occasion, the Venerable Mahaka was the most junior bhikkhu in that sangha. Then the Venerable Mahaka said to the Venerable Chief Elder, "It would be good, Venerable Elder, if a cool wind would blow and a canopy of clouds would form and the sky would drizzle." Yeah, that would be good, friend. So it seems like they were just having some small talk, but actually at this point, the Venerable Mahaka performed such a feat of spiritual power that a cool wind blew and a canopy of clouds formed and the sky drizzled. Then it occurred to Citta the householder, such is the spiritual power and might possessed by the most junior bhikkhu in this sangha. So he's quite awestruck. He quite admires what Mahaka is able to do. And then when the Venerable Mahaka arrived at the monastery, he said to the Venerable Chief Elder, "Is this much enough, Venerable Elder?" "That's enough, friend Mahaka. What's been done is sufficient, friend Mahaka. What's been offered is sufficient." So the Chief Elder is quite not very impressed about what's happening. He just goes back to his dwelling, and the Venerable Mahaka also went back to his dwelling. But Chitta is very impressed what has just happened. So then Chitta the householder approached the Venerable Mahaka, paid homage to him, sat down to one side and said to him, "It would be good, Venerable Sir, if Master Mahaka would show me a superhuman miracle of spiritual power." Then, householder, spread your cloak upon the veranda and scatter a bundle of grass upon it. "Yes, Venerable Sir," Chitta the householder replied, and he spread his cloak upon the veranda and scattered a bundle of grass upon it. Then, when he had entered his dwelling and shut the bolt, the Venerable Mahaka performed a feat of spiritual power such that a flame shot through the keyhole and the chink of the door and burned the grass, but not the cloak. Chitta the householder shook out his cloak and stood to one side, shocked and terrified. Then the Venerable Mahaka came out of his dwelling and said, to Chitta the Householder. Is this much enough, Householder? That's enough, Venerable Mahaka. What's been done is sufficient, Venerable Mahaka. What's been offered is sufficient. Let Master Mahaka delight in the delightful wild mango grove at Machikasanda. I will be zealous in providing Master Mahaka with robes, arms, food, lodging, and medicinal requisites. That is kindly said, Householder. So here again we see Chitta the Householder, since he is a disciple that has a wisdom quality, does not have psychic powers. He's really fascinated by what's going on. He's intrigued. He asks for more miracles. And when they actually happen, then he's shocked and terrified. So clearly this is not something that he himself has access to. But that's very fascinating to him. And I think it's a very cute little story. And at this point, the Venerable Mahaka set his lodging in order, and taking his bowl and robe, he left Machikasanda. When he left Machikasanda, he left for good, and he never returned. So the same ending as in the sutta we just read. In both cases, the bhikkhus leave and they never come back. And in both cases, there's something unusual that happens first. In the first case with Isidatta, Chitta the Householder recognizes him as an old friend. So Chitta the Householder establishes a personal connection with Isidatta. Isidatta is no longer there anonymously. Suddenly, Chitta takes a personal interest in him. And in the second case with Mahaka, also, he's no longer just any random junior monk. Suddenly, Chitta the Householder has singled him out as a person of spiritual attainments, and Chitta becomes very personally invested in Mahaka and admires him very much. And so in both cases, the bhikkhus don't seem to like being singled out in that way. So maybe Mahaka, being so junior, he didn't really think through what he was doing when he was performing the miracle. He didn't realize that that would make him special. But when he came to his senses, he quickly left that place and went to somewhere else where he could remain anonymously. And that's actually quite important in practice for many people. If you are a junior monk, you haven't reached your goal yet, especially back in the day when it was that you had a good chance of actually reaching arahantship when living in the Sangha and practicing that holy life. If you haven't reached your goal yet, if you are not an arahant yet, then it's very helpful for you if you can just be like one anonymous person in the Sangha, if you're not a special person, because the Buddha very much warned the monastics from gaining too much fame, gaining too much praise, and from the lay people taking too much interest in you personally, because that can very strongly interfere with your ability to quietly practice the path. And especially if lay people start to build up very strong personal relationships with you, then that can often feel like you're back to being a lay person, like you have these kind of lay relationships that as a monastic you're not that much interested in, like you've left your family behind, you've left all these these bonds behind. And if you can remain anonymous in a big Sangha, then that's often very, very helpful for your practice. If you're just one among a big group of bhikkhus without being singled out, that can be very, very helpful. In Western countries, obviously, it's very difficult to practice in this way because our Sanghas are so small that all the lay people will know everyone personally, and they very often take a very, very personal interest in each and every single member. So it's difficult to practice in this way, but this is an ideal way of practice if you're able to. And in some places in Asia where you have very big monasteries, it is even nowadays still possible to practice in this way. So I think that is the reason why they quickly leave Machikasana once Chitta establishes this personal connection with them, and they never come back. So I think we have time for reading one more sutta, hopefully. I'd like to read the next one because that one is also very beautiful and contains deep Dhamma teaching. and shows us one special ability of Chitta. So the next one is number 5, called Kamabu, and it goes as follows. On one occasion, the Venerable Kamabu was dwelling at Machikasada in the wild mango grove. Then Citta the Householder approached the Venerable Kamabu, paid homage to him, and sat down to one side. The Venerable Kamabu then said to him, "This has been said, Householder. With faultless wheel and a white awning, the one-spoked chariot rolls. See it coming, trouble-free, the stream cut without bondage." So this is obviously a verse. At the same time, this is a riddle or some kind of simile, and the meaning isn't totally obvious. So this Venerable Kamabu asks, "How, Householder, should the meaning of this brief statement be understood in detail?" So this is very interesting also, because here we have a monk, and the monk has a Dhamma teaching and he doesn't understand the Dhamma teaching. And then he goes to a lay person to get an explanation of what's going on. So again, this shows us how accomplished Chitta was in teaching Dhamma, as the person being the foremost Dhamma teacher among the lay people, the laymen. And also how much the Sangha appreciated having him around. So there wasn't a hierarchical barrier, and the monks could actually go and get teachings from the lay people. So Chitta asks, "Was this stated by the Blessed One, Venerable Sir?" "Yes, Householder." So Chitta obviously doesn't know this simile or this riddle, and he has to confirm that this is actually a teaching from the Buddha. So it's not that he has already a pre-learned answer to this. And so the rest of the sutta is something that he comes up with spontaneously to explain this teaching of the Buddha. So he's not just parroting stuff he's learned before, he's actually able to apply the Dhamma and to spontaneously deliver a new Dhamma talk based on this riddle. So that's also a very very admirable quality of Chitta. He didn't just memorize stuff, he has penetrated the Dhamma so deeply that he can spontaneously explain such kind of riddles. So Chitta says, "Then wait a moment, Venerable Sir, while I consider its meaning." Then, after a moment's silence, Citta the Householder said to the Venerable Kamabu, "Faultless. This, Venerable Sir, is a designation for the virtues." Somebody who's keeping sila, somebody who's keeping the virtues, is often described in the sutta as someone who's blameless or someone who's faultless. So that is, so Chitta obviously knows that, and he is able to make that connection here. And a white awning, this is a designation for liberation. So I think the connection there is white obviously is a sign for purity, a sign for clarity, a sign for being unstained without defilements. So for that reason, it is associated with being liberated. And of course, an awning, something that's high up, again corresponds to liberation. One spoke. This is a designation for mindfulness. So usually a wheel that has one spoke isn't all that stable, but obviously when you practice meditation, then you want your mind to be one-pointed, focus on just one thing. For that reason, it's called one-spoked and is a designation for mindfulness. Rolls, this is a designation for going forward and returning. So going forward and returning is the expression that refers to walking meditation. Chariot, this is a designation for this body, consisting of the 4 great elements, originating from mother and father, built up out of rice and gruel, subject to impermanence, to being worn and rubbed away, to breaking apart and dispersal. So this is the usual definition in the suttas for a body that Chitta here is repeating. Lust, Venerable Sir, is trouble. Hatred is trouble. Delusion is trouble. For a bhikkhu whose taints are destroyed, these have been abandoned, cut off at the root, made like palm stumps, obliterated so that they are no more subject to future arising. Therefore the bhikkhu whose taints are destroyed is called trouble-free. So obviously a bhikkhu whose taints are destroyed, this is an arahant, he's trouble-free because he no longer has lust, hatred, and delusion. The one who is coming is a designation for the Arahant. The stream, this Venerable Sir, is a designation for craving. So again, this is a common expression in the suttas that people who are not liberated, they are swept along in the current of craving. And that's also why somebody who's practicing the Dhamma is called somebody who's going against the stream, because we're going against the stream of craving. For a bhikkhu whose taints are destroyed, this has been abandoned, cut off at the root, made like a palm stump, obliterated so that it is no more subject to future arising. Therefore, the bhikkhu whose taints are destroyed is called one with the stream cut. Lust, Venerable Sir, is bondage, hatred is bondage, delusion is bondage. For a bhikkhu whose taints are destroyed, these have been abandoned, cut off at the root, made like palm stumps, obliterated so that they are no more subject to future arising. Therefore, the bhikkhu whose taints are destroyed is called one no more in bondage. Thus, Venerable Sir, it was said by the Blessed One, with faultless wheel and a white awning, the one-spoked chariot rolls, seat coming trouble-free, the stream cut, without bondage. It is in such a way that I understand in detail the meaning of what was stated by the Blessed One in brief. So Chitta is able to give this very profound Dhamma explanation without having heard it before, just from his own knowledge of the Dhamma. And the Venerable Kamabu then rejoices and says, "It is a gain for you, householder. It is well gained by you, householder. In that you have the eye of wisdom that ranges over the deep word of the Buddha." So this is a sutta that really shows us the deep knowledge of the Dhamma that Chitta had as one of the chief lay disciples. And then we have the next sutta is another sutta with the same monk, Kamabu. This time they're having another Dhamma discussion, he and Citta the Householder. This sutta number 6 this actually is a parallel. This is, they are mimicking or they are copying the Chula Vidala Sutta. The Chula Vidala Sutta is Majjhima Nikaya 44. And this is a sutta that was first given by the Bhikkhuni Dhammadinna. And this is the sutta, it's a very, very profound sutta. And this is a sutta for which she earned the title of being the foremost Dhamma teacher among the Bhikkhunis. And apparently this sutta also was very popular since they are repeating that discussion here in this sutta. So again, Chitta obviously knew that sutta. So again, this shows us the broad knowledge that he had of Dhamma. So I'm not going into detail with this sutta, number one, because we're a little bit running out of time, and also because somebody else asked yesterday that we go through this sutta at some point. So obviously, if we want to go through this sutta, we should go through the original spoken by Dhammadinna, not this, so to speak, copy version here. But again, this shows us Chitta's very deep knowledge. And the next one, number 7, again, this is again a conversation between a monk, Godatta, and Chitta. And here they are repeating the discourse in the Majjhima Nikaya number 43. This is the Maha Vidala Sutta. So in the original, this is a discussion between two very senior monks, Sariputta and Mahakotita. And again, this shows us the deep knowledge of Dhamma that Chitta had. So this is another very profound Dhamma teaching that Chitta obviously was familiar with. Then sutta number 8 is an encounter between Chitta and the Digantanatha Buddha. This is again a very funny sutta. And the Digantanatha Buddha, obviously, this is the leader of the Jains. So another religious teacher. And that Digantanatha Buddha, that leader of the Jains, he's coming to Majjhikasanda, and he obviously knows that Citta the Householder is a very, very strong lay follower of the Buddha. So he is, so they are meeting and they're having a conversation. And so the sutta starts with the Digantanatha Buddha asking Citta the Householder. Digantanatha Buddha says, the Buddha is teaching that there is a concentration that does not have thinking. So a concentration without thought and examination, without vitakka, vichara. So this refers to the jhana states that are higher than the first jhana. And obviously the Digantanatha Buddha doesn't believe that this exists. So he is asking Citta the Householder, do you believe the Buddha when the Buddha claims that this state exists? And Citta the Householder answers, in this matter, Venerable Sir, I do not go by faith in the Blessed One. And the Digantanatha Buddha interprets this as the Citta saying, I don't believe the Buddha. So he boasts in front of his whole assembly and says, look, I see this, sirs, how straightforward is this Citta the Householder, how honest and open, and one who thinks that thought and examination can be stopped might imagine that he could catch the wind in a net or arrest the current of the river Ganges with his own fist. So he thinks that Citta has just confirmed the Digantanatha Buddha's position. But actually Citta says, well, what do you think, Digantanatha Buddha, which one is better? Just merely believing or actually knowing for yourself? And the Digantanatha Buddha says, well, obviously knowing for yourself is better than belief. And then Citta says, I don't have to believe the Buddha because I know for myself. I can actually access all these jhanas. And I have, my mind is developed to the point that I can see for myself that these states exist. So I don't have to go by faith, by belief. I know this for myself. And then the Digantanatha Buddha gets very upset. And he says, see this, sirs, how crooked is this Citta the Householder, how fraudulent and deceptive. And then Citta points out to him that he's contradicting himself, because just now he was praising him and now he's blaming him. And then he says, well, if you were a reasonable person, I would ask you a few questions about this, but I'm just going to go now. And then he just walks out on the Digantanatha Buddha. So it's a very cute little sutta. And then I see we're running out of time, so I have to go faster. We have 2 suttas left. The next one is an encounter between Citta the Householder and his old friend, who is a naked ascetic. So his old friend has gone forth in a non-Buddhist religious or spiritual movement. And after 30 years of not having met, they meet again. And so this person, Kassapa, the naked ascetic, has gone forth for 30 years in that naked ascetic movement. And Citta the Householder has been a lay follower of the Buddha for 30 years as well. So Citta the Householder asks that naked ascetic Kassapa, in the 30 years since you went forth, have you attained any superhuman distinction in knowledge and vision worthy of the noble ones, any dwelling in comfort? So was it actually useful for you to go forth? Did you actually make any progress on a spiritual path? And that Kassapa says, in the 30 years since I went forth, Householder, I have not attained any superhuman distinction in knowledge and vision worthy of the noble ones, no dwelling in comfort, but only nakedness and the shaven head and the brush for cleaning my seat. So that's obviously a little bit, not very convincing, not a good outcome for 30 years of practice. So when this was said, Citta the Householder said to him, it's wonderful indeed, sir. It's amazing indeed, sir. So he's being very sarcastic here. How well expounded is the Dhamma in that after 30 years, you have not attained any superhuman distinction in knowledge and vision worthy of the noble ones, no dwelling in comfort, but only nakedness and the shaven head and the brush for cleaning your seat. So obviously he's being totally sarcastic here and making fun of that naked ascetic movement. And then Kassapa asks Citta if he has made any progress in the 30 years. And then Citta says, yeah, I have complete mastery over the jhanas, and I am a non-returner in the Buddha's teaching. So Citta, we learn here that Citta also was very, very highly accomplished. He's also a non-returner, as it seems that we have confirmation of 3 of the 4 chief lay disciples. There's a confirmation in the text that 3 of them were non-returners. For Kuch Uttara, we don't really know because we don't really have a proper text about her. I think it's very likely that she also was a non-returner. because in order to be considered a chief lay disciple, you should have achieved the highest that is possible for lay people. So I think it's very likely that all 4 of them were non-returners, but definitely we know for Chitta that he was a non-returner. And at that point, Kassapa is inspired and decides to also go forth in the Buddha's teaching, and then he becomes an arahant. And the last sutta here, sutta number 10, is called Seeing the Sick. This is describes the last few moments of Citta the householder's life. Citta the householder is very sick, and his relatives are standing around his deathbed, and then a lot of devas come to see Citta the householder. And it seems that at this point, Citta is actually able to interact with the devas, which is unusual because just now we had seen, like previously, that he did not have psychic powers. It seems that towards the end of his life, he had some sort of ability to interact with devas. So the devas tell him, "You've made so much merit, you're so accomplished, you should make a wish to become a wheel-turning monarch." And Chitta says, obviously dismisses them, and he says that too is impermanent, so I'm absolutely not going to make such a ridiculous wish. And his relatives and friends obviously cannot see the devas, so they think that Chitta is delirious and just talking to himself. And then Chitta explains to them that he was talking to the devas and that he was instructing the devas about impermanence. And then his friends and relatives say, well, in that case, please also teach us the Dhamma. And so he teaches them and establishes them in faith in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. And he also teaches them about generosity. Usually, if you teach about confirmed faith in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and generosity, and if this is one set of teachings that can lead to stream entry. So the text isn't quite explicit whether or not his relatives attain stream entry, but this is a teaching that could lead to stream entry. In other suttas, we see that this has led to stream entry. And after teaching that, Citta the householder passes away. So again, this mirrors a little bit the Buddha's last few moments in his life before his parinibbana. So I think this is an intentional parallel between the Buddha and Citta the householder, that also the Buddha spent the last moments of his life trying to teach the Dhamma, trying to clear up any questions that were still there, still ordaining people, still giving the opportunity to everyone to ask questions. And we know that Ananda said, well, let the Buddha rest now, don't go to see him anymore, he's about to pass away. And the Buddha was like, no, let everyone come, everybody should have the opportunity to ask any last questions, because this is your last chance. So in the same way, Citta is also teaching until the last moment of his life. So at this point, we have reached the end of the Citta Samyutta. I hope you enjoyed it. As you can see, we have a lot more material about Citta than we had about the lay women. And as you can see, many of the stories in the Citta Samyutta, they are quite humorous. We can see a lot of irony, a lot of sarcasm, a lot of cute little encounters, but also very, very deep and profound Dhamma teachings. And just as for the lay women, we see that also Citta the householder had a very deep knowledge of the suttas, and we see that a lot of suttas are either fully quoted, such as the Chula and the Mahavidala suttas from the Majjhima Nikaya, or are mentioned by name, such as the Brahmachala sutta. So it is shown over and over again that all these outstanding chief lay disciples were very, very deeply grounded in the Dhamma, and they had a huge knowledge of the Buddha's teachings. So I think this is something that we can take away, and something that we can aspire to ourselves, to learning that much Dhamma, such as these chief disciples. So at this point, I'm going to end for today. We have one chief disciple left, Hataka of Alavi. I'm not sure when we will have that session, but whenever I come to the channel next time, I will try to give a teaching about him. So at this point, I will end for today. And if you have any questions or comments, then please type them in the chat. So the person with the Sri Lankan username that I cannot read is asking, can I ask a question? I think you were here already yesterday. So if the question, as mentioned yesterday, if the question is on topic today, you can ask the question now. If the question is about general Dhamma topics, then please come this evening for the monk chat. That is the right time to ask general Dhamma questions. And Gita asks, Ayya, is Citta the Householder different from Anathapindika? Yes, very different. Citta the Householder is a completely different person. Anathapindika is also a foremost lay disciple, but he's not a chief lay disciple. And Anathapindika was foremost in, I think, giving gifts to the Sangha or supporting the Sangha in some way. Whereas Citta the Householder is foremost in Dhamma teaching. And Chitta was living in Machikasanda, whereas Anathapindika was living, I think, in Savatthi. And Anathapindika obviously was also established a monastery. He established Jeta's Grove Monastery, whereas Citta the Householder established the Wild Mango Grove Monastery. These are completely different persons. And Anathapindika is not one of the chief lay disciples. He's just one of the foremost disciples. So the chief disciples are only two. But foremost lay disciples, there are 10 or 11 for the men and also 10 for the women. And if you're interested, at some point we can actually have a look at those other foremost lay disciples, such as Anathapindika, and the qualities that they had. But these are two completely different people. And Jessica says, Ayya Vimalanyani, this talk sutta about householders is one I have wondered about. So I'm not quite sure which sutta now you're referring to, because we just went through 10 suttas. If you can clarify, then maybe I can say a little bit more about your question. And I think Gita just reposted the same question again. And I will just wait for a minute to see if Jessica wants to clarify which sutta she was referring to. And hopefully, if she was wondering about that particular sutta, I was able to clear up the things that were unclear, but now I'm not sure which one she's referring to. So I will just give it another minute, and while we wait to see if Jessica wants to clarify anything, I can let you all know that tonight we have a very special monk chat. Today Ajahn Pasano will come to the monk chat. He is a very senior monk from Abhayagiri Monastery. So we are very lucky to have him around. And I see Jessica has replied, and she says, no questions, just like the connection you made during the talk regarding householders. Okay, that's great. So tonight we were going to have Ajahn Pasano. So definitely come and check that out. It will be a very special monk chat. We are very fortunate to have senior monastics to ask these questions to. And Jessica says, it seems as householders we have so far to go to learn all the suttas. Well, yes. Yeah, it is. It can seem quite daunting in the beginning, but as we have seen, not all the suttas are super serious. There are lots of suttas that are quirky or that are funny or that have interesting stories to them. So it's not maybe not quite as difficult as we imagine, and also very entertaining. And we can just start at some point, like at the point that is the most interesting to us, and just take it from there. So if we think we have to learn all the suttas all at once, then that might seem huge. But if we just start at one point that interests us, then it's much more feasible to slowly go on, like step by step, and build up our knowledge over a long period of time. So we don't have to learn everything all at once. But one thing I think that we have really seen from studying those chief lay disciples is that definitely householders also were very, very accomplished in this Dhamma knowledge. And this is not something that people should just leave to the monastics. And especially with Chitta, we have seen that he was very active in teaching monastics also. So it's not a one-way street. Okay, so I think I'm going to end for today. As usual, we will end with 3 sadhus. Feel free to join in if you like. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And I'll see you all next time. Have a good day.